Congratulations! If you are watching this presentation, then you have been chosen for a senior leadership position in the magnificent country of India. It is very important to our organization that this transition is carried out smoothly, so please pay close attention during this presentation to get some valuable information as to how you can be successful in your new role. First, we are going to take a look at the culture of India, particularly as it relates to Hofstede's 6D cultural dimensions model. Then we will move on to the more specific communication insights, norms, and the taboos of India. The information that is going to be presented in the next few slides has all been taken off of the Hofstede website. Power distance is described by Hofstede as the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. India scores high in this dimension, much higher than we do in the United States. This cultural aspect may take some getting used to. Employees are very dependent on their supervisors for direction. They do what they are told without any sort of conflict. Immediate supervisors are accessible, but upper management is usually not. Management gives meaning to employees' work life, and as a manager, you should reward your employees in exchange for their loyalty. Be aware that negative feedback is never offered up to management. You have to be very delicate when discussing any issues that you may run into. Individualism has to do with how people's self-image is defined in terms of I or we. India tends to lean towards the more individualistic side of the spectrum, not unlike how we view things in the United States. A lot of this has to do with the Indian society's dominant religion, Hinduism. The Hindus believe in a cycle of death and rebirth, with the manner of each rebirth being dependent upon how the individual lived the preceding life. People are, therefore, individually responsible for the way they lead their lives and the impact it will have upon their rebirth. India is considered to be a masculine society. In masculine societies, people are driven by competition, achievement, and success. The advertising of one's success is very commonly practiced, just as it is here in the United States. This could translate into purchasing designer brand labels, expensive vehicles, or purchasing an aesthetically pleasing home. That being said, India is also a very spiritual country, and so they may not indulge as much as they would like to. Uncertainty avoidance is described as the extent to which members of a culture feel threatened by ambiguous or unknown situations and have created beliefs and institutions that try to avoid these. India has a medium to low preference for avoiding uncertainty. In India, it is accepted that nothing has to be perfect or go exactly as planned. Unexpected events are often tolerated and even welcomed as a break from the monotony of everyday life. Long-term orientation describes how every society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with the challenges of the present and future. The country of India has an intermediate score in this dimension, so preference to the normative and pragmatic approaches cannot be determined. In normative societies, people prefer to maintain time-honored traditions and norms while viewing societal changes with great suspicion. In pragmatic societies, people encourage thrift and efforts in modern education as a way to prepare for the future. Countries like India have a high tolerance for religious views from different parts of the world. Their passion for Hinduism is often considered a philosophy more than is considered a religion. India is pragmatic in the sense that they typically forgive a lack of punctuality and they are open to change. The last dimension we will be discussing is the dimension of indulgence. Indulgence is defined as the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses based on the way they were brought up. Relatively weak control is described as indulgence, and relatively strong control is often called restraint. India is considered a culture of restraint. This varies greatly from the United States. The people of India do not put much emphasis on leisure activities, and they remain in control of the gratification that comes from their desires. Now that you have a better idea of the cultural aspects of India, we are going to be moving on to how you will be expected to communicate once you arrive. We are going to start off by going over the basics of communication and then move into business specifics. All information presented has been gathered from culturecrossing.net. Greetings are typically entered into by a light handshake, and namaste is typically exchanged. In formal settings, it is important to let women initiate contact if they desire to do so. Many women will oftentimes avoid contact with men in public situations. Your business and formal meetings will typically begin by everyone pressing their palms together at around chest level and saying namaste. It is common that people will usually nod or bow slightly as well. It is also important to note here that hugs and kisses as a form of greeting should be avoided at all costs. It is also important to note that because of their masculine society, most Indian people will tell you what you want to hear in order to remain polite. It is best to be patient and observe what actions follow the communication. Indians prefer an indirect style of communication. You will rarely hear them tell you no if they do not agree with your suggestions. This is something we will be talking about further along in the presentation. It is widely accepted to stand about 3 to 3.5 feet apart when communicating with your peers, as touching is generally not a part of Indian communication. Male friends sometimes show their friendship by holding hands or wrapping their arms around each other as they walk. It is also important to note that PDA is never shown between men and women in public, as this can be interpreted as flirting. In the Indian culture, sustained eye contact is generally not the norm. During your business meetings, you can feel free to hold eye contact, but be wary not to hold it intently, as this will make your associates feel uncomfortable. When you are communicating with elders, it is common to use indirect eye contact as a sign of respect. It is also important to note that as a foreigner, you can expect to be stared at. Please be respectful if this situation arises, and remember that you are a guest in their country. Before we discuss the business specifics, we are going to be venturing into the miscellaneous bits of information that will better help you communicate and understand the people that you will be working with. One major thing to be aware of is how the people of India view the concept of time. IST, or Indian Standard Time, is a widely accepted joke among Indians. This basically means that if you have an appointment at noon, you can expect your party to arrive or for the meeting to begin anywhere from 30 minutes to a day later. You can expect at least an hour delay, but it is important that you remain punctual within a 15-minute time frame. Time in India is viewed as eternal, as Indians typically have a very relaxed attitude. It is usually not considered rude for people to run late to social events. Something that you are going to have to pay attention to when you get into the country is how you are gesturing. A good rule of thumb to follow regarding your shoe removal is if you see shoes arranged near the door, take yours off as well. If you need to beckon someone, extend your arm and make a scratching motion with your finger, palm facing down. It is also important to note here that the people of India always eat with their right hand, as the left is considered unclean. It is important to the organization that you respect the Indian culture by respecting what they consider to be taboo. This includes avoiding PDA and lewd behavior, touching people or moving past objects with your shoes, and winking or whistling. Also, be aware of how you are touching your ears. Ears are considered sacred, so pulling or boxing one's ears is considered a grave insult. Now that we have discussed the basics of communication in India, we can move on to how business is operated. We are going to start out by discussing how to dress appropriately on the job. Dress is conservative for both men and women. Men typically dress in dark-colored suits, and they wear shoes that are easy to slip on and off when at all possible. Women will typically dress in business suits or dresses, and blouses are typically considered appropriate. It is important that women avoid tight-fitting and revealing clothing. It is also important to note that during a first meeting with your associates, do not dress in jeans or casual business attire. You'll be meeting a lot of people during your first few weeks in the country. It is typically standard to address people directly by using their professional titles, followed by their surname. It is best to wait until being invited before you refer to people by their first names. In regards to business cards, you must always present and receive them with your right hand. It is also important to note that business card exchange is typically handed out after the initial handshake and greeting. During business meetings, it is appropriate to arrive on time even though you may be kept waiting. Once everyone arrives, it is standard to begin meetings with a fair amount of small talk, and oftentimes no business is discussed during the initial meeting. This may seem frustrating, but it is important to remain patient and follow the direction of conversation as put forth by your peers. Safe topics of conversation include marital status, family, your educational background, where you grew up, and sports. Avoid topics such as politics, religion, the caste system, and the Kashmir region, as you do not want to offend your colleagues and peers. When you are in charge of setting up a meeting, be sure to send a proposed agenda and supplemental materials in advance of the meeting. As India is a very hierarchical society, it is customary to defer to the most senior person in the room for decision making and direction. It is important to note that Indians are typically non-confrontational and they value relationship building and harmony, so it is important to avoid hard selling, pressure tactics, and any sort of conflict or confrontation. If you do disagree with your team members, do not disagree with them publicly, as it is considered disrespectful. Indians value an indirect communication style and they will typically avoid using the word no. If they do not agree with you, they will typically say maybe or that would be difficult. Although this may seem frustrating, it is important to remain patient during the negotiations and rely on actions rather than words when considering how a person feels about your suggestions. It is also important to note that decisions typically take time and are decided by the most senior person involved. Concluding our discussion on how business is conducted in India, it is important to pay attention to those cultural aspects we discussed through Hofstede's model. The caste system is still very much evident through the Indian business world. It is also essential to realize that the Indian society is built on close familial relationships which tend to cross over into the business world. Take notice of familial ties that run through the organization. The paternalistic approach that is often taken by managers in India due to its hierarchical structures. This has been a broad overview of Indian culture and how business is conducted in India. I want to thank you for your contributions to our organization, and I have no doubt that you will be a great asset to the team in India. If you have any other concerns or questions, please feel free to contact me directly. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.